So I've talked about this before on the channel, but it's worth bringing up again because we have new information on the Fallout TV show, which finally has a release date. It was teased just the other day that it will be appearing on April 12th, 2024. So we've seen absolutely nothing about this yet, and I'm not worried. I've seen a lot of really not so great adaptations over the last couple of years. Definitely a lot of unique spins on shows, some remaining more faithful to the source material than the others. And I'm not just talking about video games either. I'm talking about just books and comic books and novels and all that kind of stuff. I guess that's technically a book, isn't it? But you get my point. There's been a lot of adaptations lately over some source material, and then a TV studio will pick it up and do something with it. I gotta say, though, that while some are better than others, I think all of them have remained somewhat faithful to the source material. And for that reason alone, I'm excited for what I think Fallout could potentially be. Now, when you think along the terms of Fallout, there are so many different ways that this show can come to fruition, and I hope it's something that is explored in various ways. Because if you look back at the older Fallout games, typically revolving around the vault and the trials and tribulations within the vault, and then ultimately getting out of the vault and getting out into the world, and those moments of sheer discovery and craziness to see what the world has become, ravished by super mutants and robots that have kind of gone astray over the years, and a whole new world to explore, even though it is your world because you were locked in a vault for so long. When Fallout 76 came out, despite the ridiculous shortcomings with that game, and how much I wanted to love it and how I kept playing it despite it not being what I wanted it to be, that game instead takes a little different look as to where you're the pioneers establishing this brave new world that you would eventually go on to explore in other games. As in, you're the kind of first responder, you know, the debris clears, and then you open the door and you're the first person out. Basically, like, you know, file new, so to speak. That could be an interesting take on Fallout as well, because it's going to show society kind of scavenging and building up, kind of like the early seasons of The Walking Dead, when Rick wakes up for the first time and has no idea where he is, and you're learning about the world as he's learning about the world. There's no kind of explanation as to what's happening, and he's seeing it for the first time. You're seeing it, which was a great way to present the material. And I'm not talking about, obviously, for the comic books, you know, and you follow that. But my point is, there's a lot of different ways that they can kind of treat this show. They could take multiple angles. And then in terms of the story arc, every Fallout game has some sort of story arc associated with it, whether it's you trying to bring balance to an area by recovering a piece of gear or technology that may help repopulate the world, or if it's a simple revenge plot, or if it's a simple go off and just try to stay alive, like Fallout 76 was, just go thrive. I'm curious to see what kind of the hook of the show is. And I hope that they don't make it a mystery or something that doesn't pan out, because a lot of times these shows that are, I'm going to guess, probably 8 or 10 episodes, right? If it's on Amazon Prime, probably like an hour an episode or something. A lot of times these long, sweeping arcs don't really have the payoff that we want. And I'm worried about that only because after seeing what happened with like Twisted Metal, for example, or with Halo, the TV show on Paramount Plus, it's clear to me that while the creators wanted to take some of the source material and make it their own, they very quickly ran out of momentum and steam on what that idea was. as cool as it'll be in a Fallout TV show, the moment that the survivors open the vault door and go in or out to explore a weird vault or to be survivors and to enter the world, when you have those massive iconic moments, which I'm sure the show will replicate very faithfully, that magic isn't going to last you 8 to 10 hours worth of content. There's going to have to be something else that happens later on. And I worry that, as with a lot of these other shows that have come up, Fallout is going to suffer from a very similar thing where they don't really have that much to talk about. And when you really break down some of these games and you really break down some of these adaptations without the moment-to-moment gameplay, the story itself isn't that wildly fascinating. Now, obviously, you're not going to be playing the TV show. You're going to be sitting and watching. So the adaptation of what that looks like is very concerning as well, because ultimately what you want to have happen in a show like this is have some characters that have that really great companion type system where you learn backstory about all the various characters. They all come together to, use their unique strengths to overcome some sort of challenge. Hip, hip, hooray. I mean, this is standard, like, movie making 101, right? The problem is, since you're not going to be playing this game, you're going to be watching it. Those moment-to-moment explorations of, like, using VATS or standing at your crafting bench for hours on end trying to figure out how to make things for your mech, or how to build the perfect society, or the moments of terror when you walk into an area and there's enemies and you're confronted with them and you're limited on ammunition and all hell breaks loose. All fun moments, but all have been executed poorly a lot of times in these adaptations. And it's clear that, a strong franchise in of itself, and I would argue Fallout, definitely a very, very beloved franchise by many. I would argue that a show like that doesn't necessarily carry itself just on name alone. I mean, look at the Resident Evil series. Resident Evil is a massive franchise, and clearly when they made that television show, they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. And it got canceled pretty quickly, which is frustrating. Obviously, Lance Reddick passed away. That may or may not have had something to do with it, although I think they might have canceled it before he did pass. I don't really recall, actually. But the point is, just the sake of the franchise being the franchise isn't necessarily enough to kind of carry the weight of the show. And that's what worries me a lot. You could go in a totally opposite direction like they've done this season on Wheel of Time, which is vastly, wildly different. So much so that it's just basically in name only. They've taken the characters that they established from the existing franchise and have wildly changed what they do from the book, so much so they're not even recognizable. They could do something more kind of in between, like what they did with Halo and the Silver Universe, where it's somewhat related to, the original Halo plot, but again has its own spin on it. Or it could be a much more shot-for-shot faithful recreation, like something we saw from The Walking Dead or Invincible, even though it was kind of taken out of order. So there's definitely lots of options here for the adaptation. It just does concern me that a lot of people who work on these shows don't necessarily seem to understand the gist of the game. And if I asked you to explain to me in a sentence or two what Fallout meant to you, obviously answers would be different, but I can guarantee you anybody else who is a fan of Fallout would be, yep, he's got it. They understand. And that's what worries me. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm looking at the kind of crew who was involved in this show. There were people who were responsible for Westworld, which started off cool, but kind of fell apart pretty quickly. Person of interest was that. There were people who worked on the 2018 Tomb Raider and the original Captain Marvel movie, not the new one that's coming, about the original one. And then there's a cast of a bunch of actors, which I don't recognize any of them. Not a big deal, not that I probably would anyway. But other than, actually I shouldn't say that. Walton Goggins I do recognize. He's the only on the list of anybody that I recognize. But yeah, I'm just worried, I'm worried that they just can't pull it off, but I want them to. If I was tasked, though, as I wrap up this video, if I was tasked with what I would want to do for a Fallout show, I'm probably leaning more towards the vault stuff, at least for a majority of the season. I think having that unknown element of what is really out there, the characters not knowing what's on the other side of the doors, I think poses more of an exciting threat than actually being out there. Because in the game Fallout, when you're first starting off, you're obviously very weak. You have like your pistol and like a baseball bat, but very quickly on, you're going to find weapons that make you a formidable opponent against some of these hellacious monsters. And about, I don't know, I would say in any playthrough I've ever done, within about 10 hours, the threat is completely gone because you're just so kitted out, you're fine. But those initial experiences are really, I think, what makes the show tense. And I hope they take a somewhat survivor horror element to this show when it does start to gain fruition. Something along the lines of The Boys, where it is that ultra realistic peril, moment to moment, where things do actually matter and characters do die, and it's not gracious and it's not superhero-y kind of comic-y book related, but it's actually, like this guy died and like he just explodes, because that's exactly what happened if like you were involved in this. And if they're going to make the super mutants a menacing enemy, and they're going to make some of these weird deformations like the Death Claw super menacing, then they have to be super menacing. But showing them too early and kind of taking away that excitement of wondering what they're going to look like and what their involvement is, I think could be a bad thing for this show. And then especially thinking longevity, is this something that they plan to do for multiple seasons, or was this just a little cash grab that they got and they threw some money at it, and Bethesda's like, yeah, sure, we'll give you the rights to our show, and they're going to do a one and done, or it's going to be something that's not memorable. So all these questions and more, but we'll know soon enough. We're just about 6 months away from the time of this recording, actually a little less, and we're going to get to see it, and I can't wait. We'll probably get some previews at some point, and I will definitely do an episode by episode review when it comes out, like I did for all the other great video game stuff. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.